On that fateful day, as I stood before my father's grave, the cool breeze seemed to carry whispers of the past, a reminder of the towering figure he had been. My father had once been the CEO of a leading construction company, a titan in his industry, and following his death, the mantle and an enormous legacy had passed not to me, but to my brother-in-law, Ethan. The contrast in our inheritances couldn't have been starker. Ethan received the company and the vast estate, while I was left with nothing but an old mini truck. At the funeral, Ethan, never one to mask his smugness, couldn't resist a jibe. With this, he gestured grandly at the documents and keys he held. I've got the company and the entire estate in my grasp. That mini truck suits you. However, to me, that mini truck was far from just an old vehicle. As I gazed at it, parked unassumingly among the shadows of towering oaks, it seemed to hold a piece of my father's life, a remnant of a past that both of us had struggled to navigate. When I turned the ignition key, the engine coughed to life, breaking the silence with its determined rumble. That's when I noticed the navigation system flickering to life, displaying a destination already set, a place unknown to me. With a mixture of curiosity and resolve, I began to drive. My name is Michael Don, a tutor who recently turned 43. The large coffin before which I stood was a stark reminder of the complicated relationship I had shared with my father. He had built the construction empire from scratch, hoping I would one day take the reins. Instead, I chose a path aligned with my childhood dream, to teach, to inspire young minds, just as I had been inspired. This choice had been the root of many heated arguments and had created a chasm between us that, until recently, seemed insurmountable. Throughout my student years, our relationship had been defined by those intense arguments and long periods of silence. Yet, despite the distance, I never grew to despise him. Inside, a part of me always longed to prove that my dreams were worth chasing, even if they led me away from the empire he had hoped I would inherit. The weight of being the eldest son bore down on me, a mantle of responsibility I felt I had shirked, leading to a deep-seated guilt. This psychological barrier had kept me from visiting my parents' home for years. My mother, ever the peacemaker, relied on my sister, Lucy, to bridge the gap. Lucy, with her husband, would often send gifts to our father under my name, fine liquors or tickets for trips on his birthday or their anniversary. Each time, she implored me to mend fences with him. I wish you and Dad could make up by talking directly. Dad is just putting on a brave face, deep down, he must be feeling lonely, Lucy would say, her words echoing in my mind each time I hesitated at the thought of reaching out. As I drove the mini truck towards the mysterious destination set in the navigation system, Lucy's words mixed with the hum of the engine, a constant reminder of the unresolved past and the uncertain road ahead. The journey seemed to be taking me not just to a physical location, but towards a deeper understanding of my father's last intentions, perhaps even a final reconciliation, crafted not through words, but through the silent language of legacy and memory. However, one day, the sad news that my father had cancer reached the family. Upon hearing this, I did not hesitate to resign from my job and head towards the home where my family was waiting. It was a moment of clarity, a realization that what truly mattered in life was life itself, and past conflicts with my father suddenly seemed insignificant. Recognizing the importance of taking action without regrets, I returned to my hometown and voluntarily took up teaching at a local tutoring school while caring for my bedridden father. At first, my father was unable to hide his surprise at my return, but he eventually accepted it with few words. I didn't throw any extra words at my father either. I simply stayed by his side and quietly continued to care for him. Whenever I offered help, and it was needed, my father would always express his gratitude in a low voice. Those words brought a measure of peace to my heart. Sadly, my father's long battle with illness came to an end. The last page of my father's life was quietly turned in the presence of me, Lucy, and our mother. We could never fully understand what our father might have been thinking in his last moments, but we sincerely hoped that his soul had embarked on a peaceful journey. Even though it was an anticipated event, the sense of loss deeply affected the family. My mother, Lucy, and even my young nephew Bob, who was an elementary student, were all engulfed in sorrow and shed tears. The only one who did not openly show emotion was my brother-in-law, Ethan. He coldly said to me, who was busy making the details of the funeral, "Did he finally die, huh?" The moment I heard those words, I inwardly praised myself for not resorting to violence against Ethan. Instead, I focused on preparing for my father's funeral, not having to waste time on such trivial matters. The busyness served as a temporary distraction from the pain in my heart, almost like an oasis with no room to spare for Ethan's words. I concentrated on the funeral preparations, ensuring each necessary procedure was carried out with certainty. The relationship between Ethan and myself had never been calm, to begin with, and over time, it had only worsened. However, this was a very different impression from the first time I met him, back then. Ethan had been a competent member of my father's company, and I had respected his abilities deeply. It felt as though I had gained a real brother when Ethan married my sister Lucy. He was 4 years my senior and seemed like a role model. Even before the marriage, I would consult him about various problems, and Ethan always listened with empathy. Among those discussions was the significant theme of whether I should take over the family business. "Your father, Kevin, should live his own life, and Michael, you have your own path. No one knows which choices in life are ultimately right, so the most important thing isn't to pursue the right choices, but to make the ones you won't regret when you look back." With those encouraging words from him, I decided to transfer from the business school where I was studying management to the Faculty of Education, where I wanted to study. As time passed, Ethan and Lucy married, stepping into a new chapter as a family. 20 long years have passed since then, and the gap between my father and me had become a gulf. I had moved on with my life, losing the opportunity to bridge that gap. However, upon receiving the news of my father's illness, I put everything aside and hurried back home. Ethan, who once welcomed me warmly, had gradually changed, and his attitude now bore a sense of discomfort. Ethan didn't show his transformation openly, but whenever we were alone in the house, he didn't hesitate to comment in a cold tone, "You rushed back in a panic when you heard Kevin collapsed, didn't you? But no matter what happens here, you won't inherit anything." I was momentarily confused by his sudden words, struggling to keep up with my thoughts. "What do you mean? Don't pretend you don't know. It may be a coincidence, but even if you now desire to manage the company, it's already decided that I will take over as the next head." His sharp words stunned me, and my voice grew higher than intended. "No, that's not it. I didn't come back for such ambitions." I realized my lack of filial piety and wanted to show my apologies to Dad, even if it's late. "I don't need your fancy talk. It's just like a line from a TV drama, isn't it? Lucy likes that kind of stuff, but were all those gifts you sent just a calculation to look good in front of Kevin?" he retorted. "That is absolutely not true." I desperately tried to clear up the misunderstanding about me with every explanation. I mustered all the patience I could, however, it seemed Ethan had already made up his mind and wasn't interested in taking my words to heart. What's more, his words could be taken as a slight against Lucy, and for the first time, I felt a strong distrust towards Ethan. Since that incident, Ethan began to throw blatant sarcasm towards me. "No matter how much you try to get in the good graces of Kevin, that time has passed. Don't make me laugh. Go back to where you should be learning and deal with your troubled students." At first, I deeply reflected on how I appeared to others and how others perceived me. However, Ethan's words reflected a self-righteous, authoritarian stance rather than true concern for our father. His behavior sometimes belittled his own father and even Lucy, who was his spouse. Through these things, I became convinced that Ethan had married Lucy with his eyes on my father's company and inheritance. As if to prove this, he seldom visited my father's sickbed and never took part in caregiving. Now, all I could do was work as hard as I could to protect the company that Kevin built. Indeed, Ethan's words were polished, but at his core was a simple wish to avoid troubles. When the weekend came around, he would immerse himself in golf, his personal enjoyment under the guise of business. There was no sign of him wanting to take care of his son. Ethan publicly stated he wanted his son to acquire many skills to eventually take over the family business, but he pushed the responsibility of transportation to Lucy, who maintained the household. When Lucy showed even slight discontent with the burden, Ethan would say, "I'm giving my all to everything for Kevin's sake. Now is the time to produce results by any means necessary. Let's overcome this trial together," and he would speak passionately, taking Lucy's hand whenever the topic of our father came up. Lucy struggled to assert herself and would typically nod in reluctant agreement. Ethan was adept at playing the perfect person in front of Lucy, so it's understandable that she was persuaded. He revealed his true self to me, probably because he saw me as the same kind of person as him. Once I get used to Ethan's sarcasm and provocations, I won't notice them anymore. However, when our beloved father passed away, my heart nearly broke. I was filled with an indescribable sadness and emptiness, while Ethan outwardly seemed pained by the deterioration of our father's health. I couldn't help but suspect that Ethan had been waiting for this moment. This realization brought immense sorrow to my heart, and feelings of anger and grief overwhelmed me. As a result, Ethan inherited most of our father's vast fortune. He had been welcomed into our family as a son-in-law and had the same inheritance rights as Lucy and me. Following my father's will, Ethan inherited the majority of the shares of the company my father managed, as well as a significant amount of wealth. This was an unforeseen development, and I was truly at a loss for words. Despite my status as a biological child, I had believed the inheritance would be divided fairly among the three of us, but the reality was that Ethan received almost everything. All that was left to me was an old workhorse mini truck that my father had once cherished. Ethan acted shocked in public, but when it was just the two of us, he scoffed with a laugh. "You came all the way from the city to this rural backwater, cared for Kevin day and night, and all you ended up with is this tiny truck, huh? What an ironic end. Now the company is mine, and you're left with just the mini truck as your inheritance. It's like a comedy." Without any attempt to hide the cynical smile tugging at the corners of his mouth, Ethan left the room. Overwhelmed by a sense of emptiness, I gripped the keys to the mini truck tightly in my hand. The cold metal of the keys reminded me of the harshness of reality. "Keep your head up," Kevin had his reasons. "He didn't mean to upset you. It's true that pickup was something Dad always cherished, it was his beloved vehicle. There's no way he lacked affection for you." My family offered warm encouragement, but I couldn't muster words from the bottom of my heart. It felt as though I had been struck with a blow. I understand that material inheritance doesn't reflect the depth of a father's love, but the reality that a man like Ethan monopolizes the fruits of my father's hard work is an unbearable insult to me. The problem is not about the money. It left a deep scar on my heart to entrust the company that my father had worked so hard to build to a man who was secretly waiting for his death. But I have no power or means to change the situation. My hand unconsciously gripped the key to the mini truck left to me. Against the backdrop of the clear sky, I decided to take care of the mini truck left to me. This vehicle is the only thing my father left me. It feels like it has some deep meaning, I thought. That if I could cleanse my feelings in some way while polishing this car, the work would take on an added significance. I used a hose to carefully wash the body, and after finishing the task, I sat in the driver's seat where my father always sat and started the engine. That's when I noticed something different on the navigation system screen. "That's odd, what is this?" For some reason, the navigation screen, which should normally display my location and nearby map, showed a single thick blue route. Why is there a destination set on the navigation system? This type of display usually appears when navigating a route to a destination. When I checked the destination shown on the screen, instead of a specific place, there were only coordinates entered. Following these coordinates would require about an hour's drive. Anyway, I'd like to go for a drive in this light truck and check out the place. Without giving it much thought, I put the truck in first gear and left the house. About an hour into the enjoyable drive, I arrived. Could it be home? I unexpectedly stopped in my tracks at the sight before me. In contrast to the stately houses in my hometown, there stood a small, modest house that gave a sense of warmth. As far as I looked around, a natural silence reigned, and I couldn't even detect the presence of anyone else. I stepped out of the truck and stood in front of the small house, feeling a slight bewilderment. I couldn't find any signage that might symbolize the house, but it was clear that this spot the navigation system showed me had some kind of meaning. So, I just stood there without turning back. With a bit of hesitation, I pressed the doorbell, and as the heavy door slowly opened inward, the person standing there was unexpected. "Mom? I've been waiting, Michael. Come in, dear." "Why are you here, Mom? And how come this place was set in Dad's navigation system?" "I will explain everything, but first, come inside and take a breath." Following my mother, I hesitantly crossed the threshold of the house. The interior was simple yet warm, a functional space with only the essentials for living. My mother carefully prepared tea for me and started a conversation in a relaxed voice. "Actually, this is your father's secret hideout." "A hideout?" This is the first time I've heard that my father owned a place like that. With a serene expression, she began to speak plainly. "This place is our secret spot where we come when we needed our own space or simply wanted to enjoy some peace and quiet. When a small marital spat seemed likely to escalate, it was our rule to come here to calm down." "You didn't know about it, did you?" I was lost in surprise and deep thought. I had no inkling that such a family rule existed. She continued speaking, "And this is something your father wanted you to have." Saying this, she produced a brown envelope and handed me a separate handwritten letter. The envelope seemed slightly bulging, as if something had been tightly packed inside, suggesting it contained something important. Holding the letter, I decided to read it first. "To Michael, Dad has caused you a lot of trouble and made you endure unbearable hardships over the years. I want to apologize from the bottom of my heart." The letter was filled with my father's reflections on past mistakes and his profound gratitude to me. "I have been told repeatedly by your mother that it is you who is at fault for leaving home of your own will, that a son has the right to choose his own path in life. Indeed, we both have our stubbornness, but when I fell ill and you came back, it was an unexpected and delightful surprise for me that I couldn't express directly. It's just my awkwardness. I am deeply grateful to you for supporting and taking care of the family." This letter contained the sincere feeling of a father that I had never heard before. Emotions welled up from deep within me, choking my throat. The letter continued with a paragraph about Ethan. To tell the truth, my distrust towards Ethan grew over time. He's good with words, making people feel at ease, but through my experience in discerning people's characters, I saw his true nature clearly. I suspected his nightly searches of the house were his way of secretly buying the property. Exhausted from work and caregiving, I had been too drained to notice such cunning behavior, but now knowing Ethan as I did, this was a believable account. "I have no intention now of entrusting the company to you, but in case of unforeseen circumstances, I have left a substantial amount with your mother so that you and Lucy will not be in want. Please accept it." I looked up at my mother. She said nothing, just gazed at the brown envelope. I reached out hesitantly for the envelope and upon examining its contents, confirmed everything was in my mother's name. Quietly yet firmly, she began to speak. "Even if I changed the accounts to the children's names, it would be considered a gift under tax laws, and if written in the will, Ethan might use it to siphon off the estate. Your father, to avoid Ethan's eyes, had secretly given this money to me while he was still alive. What I'm about to say is that I want to formally hand this money over to you and Lucy as a living gift," she added. This explanation reached my ears, but my consciousness couldn't fully grasp their significance. The amount written in the account book she presented was an immense sum, unlike anything I'd ever seen. Dad left this money for me. This simple truth was very important to me. It wasn't about the amount. The fact that my father had been concerned about me, not Ethan, who was seen as the successor, moved me deeply. We may not have exchanged heartfelt words often, but I pride myself on understanding that you always cared for us deeply. I want everything I entrusted to you through your mother to be passed on to you. Take it as thanks for the gifts you've given me every year, and for that, I am truly grateful." Before I knew it, I was crying out loud, unable to contain my emotions. For a long time, I felt that father never really understood me, but I was completely wrong. He always understood and cherished me. That must be why he trusted me with that old mini truck, believing I would never let it go and would always use it well. Mom, I really wish I could have done more for Dad. I couldn't suppress the deep regret I was feeling inside, but my mother eased my feelings with a gentle smile. She answered me as if she could see through the deep regret I was hiding in my heart. It's natural for children to think they could have done more when mourning a parent's death, but you brought great joy to your father and gave him so much love. You were your father's greatest pride. Hearing her words, I found myself crying unknowingly. Her words spurred a resolution within me. I was determined not to leave the company my father built to someone like Ethan, who wished for his death. I resolved to quietly rebel, to devise a meticulous plan without letting Ethan realize I had acquired a substantial fortune. The first step was to reach out to the corporate executives my father had trusted to build a foundation for their support. They agreed to help, endorsing my stance to carry on my father's will. It was clear from their reactions that my father had never spoken ill of me. Meanwhile, my mother and sister acted as though consoling me during the reading of the will, ensuring Ethan's attention was not on me. They continued to perform the same act in front of Ethan. As a result, Ethan is convinced he has succeeded and looks down on me with arrogance. Hey, do you, abandoned by your father and left a poor man, still intend to stay in this house? I'm the new president now, admit your defeat and go back home. And every time he uttered those words, he would dismissively wave his hand as if swatting away a small fly. Ethan's smug demeanor, since he assumed the position of CEO, ironically led to an unsettling atmosphere in the company's management. While his high position was well known throughout the company, instead of fulfilling the responsibilities that came with it, he became increasingly haughty towards his subordinates, which led to intensified internal conflicts, and many employees left the company dissatisfied with him. Even as valuable talent drained away, Ethan remained unquestioning of his direction, brimming with self-assurance. Those who can't grasp my superior vision might as well quit immediately, he declared publicly, continuing to make decisions based on his own judgment, unaffected by the opinions of others. As the chaos within the company grew day by day, Ethan indulged in financial pleasures and a lavish lifestyle, while the passion he once might have had for the business seemed to have vanished into thin air. When I first met him, he truly seemed like a wonderful person. He was competent at his work, and even Dad approved of him. How could he have changed so much? She shed tears every night, secretly away from the children's eyes. I couldn't just watch the company decline right before my eyes. I was quietly but surely preparing my next move, and finally, the time came to act. That day, I left home earlier than usual and waited for the moment Ethan arrived at the office. As Ethan stepped into the president's office, he was astonished to see me there, his eyes wide with surprise. I had been waiting for his delay, and the sight of me sitting comfortably in the chair usually reserved for the president was an unexpected scene for him. "What the hell are you doing? Why are you sitting there? What is the meaning of this? Someone remove this person who doesn't belong here." "Actually, the one who should be leaving is you," I calmly retorted. "What are you talking about? Have you finally lost your mind?" Despite his disdainful look, as if swatting away an insect, I remained calm and responded, "Using the assets bequeathed to us by our father, I have acquired the majority of the company's shares. An extraordinary general meeting of shareholders was held, and you were officially ousted from the position of president, Ethan. I'm sorry to say, but you are no longer the president of this company." "Wait just a minute," he was clearly confused, repeating words that made no sense. "Don't you understand? I now control 2/3 of this company's shares. But the inheritance left by father, wasn't it just an old mini truck that you got?" "That mini truck turned into money in an unexpected way," I replied, with no intention of explaining the details about the hideaway that Ethan was probing into, and deliberately obfuscated his answer to divert the topic, which only darkened Ethan's expression further. "The game is over, leave this place immediately." "First, please have a look at this calmly," I said as I presented Ethan with several documents. As Ethan received and perused them, his complexion rapidly changed and he turned pale. What is this? This is the minutes of the extraordinary general meeting of shareholders, and this other document is the notice of your dismissal. Clutching the papers, Ethan's face turned red with anger. He crushed the documents in his hands and could not hide his intense agitation. You think this will hold up? I'll take legal action. Unperturbed by the threat, I responded calmly, by all means, proceed with legal action. We have ample justification for our actions. What justification? You've been after that old man's wealth and this company from the start. It's nothing more than an act of jealousy, Ethan. Let me ask you directly, have you been diverting company assets for personal use and engaging in leasing contracts? What if I have? What's it to you? Ethan visibly lost color, his face turning ashen with shock. How did you know about that? I confronted Ethan directly, listing his specific acts of misconduct. They involved taking home computers and appliances provided by the company for personal use. There's more to be made clear. Computers that should be in the office are being used at your home for personal reasons, along with TVs and other appliances. Treating company property as your own personal belongings, wouldn't you say this is sufficient just cause? Struggling to find words, Ethan frantically tried to come up with a rebuttal. Why, how do you know about that? Locking eyes with Ethan, not noticing his quivering lips, I pressed on with more facts. You should have been more aware of your position. Did you become complacent the moment you thought you had everything under control? I continued to pursue Ethan's actions based on information from the company's executives. After the father passed away, Ethan's behavior became increasingly arrogant. While he had always been condescending, he used to maintain a respectful posture toward his superiors, but this changed after becoming president. He started shifting responsibilities onto others, pushing troubles down to subordinates while enjoying his high office, sometimes even dozing off in his chair. This attitude led loyal employees who once respected the father to leave the organization, frustrated. Ethan vented his displeasure at me. He emphasized the impossibility of me fulfilling the role of a manager, based on the fact that I had never worked a single day in this enterprise. But think about it, how can someone with absolutely no experience in running a company become president? It's impossible to leave management to someone like you. You are absolutely right, I retorted. I have no intention of becoming the president of this company. The reason I'm sitting in this chair is more of a symbolic message to you. Actually, a new president has already been elected by a different board of directors and is already carrying out their duties. Stunned, he stood with his mouth agape, his eyes round with surprise. The turn of events was completely different from what he had anticipated. He had been convinced for a long time that I was after the presidency and had plotted to replace him. As I've said many times, I'm not after the president's position. My only wish is to honor my father and protect the company. He dedicated his life to building, that's all. Who would believe such flowery words? You might not understand. You've always focused solely on the wealth and status to be inherited from our father, not on his personal worth, I responded. After my response, Ethan stood trembling with indignation for a while, but then seemed to make a decision and regained his composure. Do you think this is over and you can enjoy it? He scoffed. He left the president's office with a swish. That night, an unexpected twist occurred. Lucy shockingly threw divorce papers at Ethan, signaling the end of their marriage, a consequence of Ethan's misdeeds at the company leading to his disciplinary dismissal. The successor as president was chosen from among the directors who revered my father, determined to protect what he built, no matter the difficulties. I felt that the company should be entrusted to someone who would carry on my father's legacy, a sentiment supported by my mother and sister. As I proceeded with the arrangements for Ethan's dismissal, including coordinating with lawyers, Lucy was preparing for the divorce. On the day she brought up divorce, her pained voice echoed from the couple's room to the living room, filling the house with a heavy atmosphere. Here, why do you turn away from me now? Is it because I've lost the title of president? You've lost interest in me. Maintaining her composure yet with unyielding resolve in her voice, Lucy responded, "There's no sense in you talking about betrayal. You were the one who betrayed our relationship from the start. Your love was not for me, but for the title of the president's daughter. You neglected our home, made no effort to raise our children, and showed no respect to our ailing father in his last days. And in the end, you tried to claim everything inherited from our father as your own. Now is the time for you to pay the consequences." Ethan couldn't say anything back at her. Contemplating the torment Lucy must have endured, worrying about her children's futures and the company's fate, her internal conflict must have been immense. However, thanks to the inheritance left by our father, she had a solid financial foundation to raise her children after the divorce. We planned to live a peaceful life away from strife with our mother and sister. The only concern was the possibility of retaliation from Ethan, but he doesn't have any funds left to strike back. He lost a substantial amount to an investment scam and is even in debt now. Her words alleviated that worry. Ethan had apparently fallen for a scam involving inheritance matters. The man claiming to be an employee of a brokerage firm was actually a fraudster, and Ethan, seduced by his sweet words, lost a significant sum. This case sadly illustrates how unscrupulous people prey on those who come into a large amount of money. Ethan is now experiencing the financial hell he crafted with his own hands. Meanwhile, I filled my days with fulfillment while taking care of my mother's daily needs. I enjoyed the passing of time peacefully and managed a comfortable life without any inconvenience, continuing my work at the tutoring school. My mother and I found great joy in caring for my nephew Bob, who was very attached to us. His presence brought a new kind of joy to our daily lives. When I grow up, I'm going to be a president. I want to be like Grandpa. His declaration, filled with the innocence of childhood dreams, brought natural smiles to our faces. Even as quiet tears beautifully adorned my mother's cheeks, witnessing her emotional response, Lucy and I exchanged knowing looks, and warmth and mutual understanding bloomed in our smiles. "You might say that now, but I won't be surprised if you want to become a teacher when you're in college," I teased him with a light tone, but my own reflections on similar past statements colored the joke, drawing a gentle laugh from all of us. "But I'm not very good at studying, so maybe I won't make a good teacher." He furrowed his brow and pondered out loud, his earnestness making the sentiment even more endearing, prompting laughter once again, this time filled with affection. In this moment, brimming with an almost excessive sense of happiness, we realized we were truly living in the present, soaking in the unity of family, and ready to accept whatever the future might hold.